What's up, you sweaty nerds and greasy degenerates? Jingliu is expected to be the next character in line after Fu Xuan in Honkai Star Rail. So I thought it would be a good idea to go ahead and talk about what she means for the meta, whether she's expected to be as good as a character like Dan Heng in Bibitur Lune, maybe better, maybe worse, or maybe just fall flat on her face. But it's a good idea to talk about these characters a little bit ahead of time because it does take a lot of preparation, time, and jade in order to pull for characters in this game. So we do usually want to find out whether it's worth pulling for what's available now or saving up for the future, like Fu Xuan, Dan Heng for the now, Jingliu, Topaz for the near future, or even wait and pull for characters in 1.5 or beyond. Because if you think the characters that are going to be coming out now are pretty fun, just imagine what they're going to be bringing in the future. So let's go ahead and dive in. It's important to note with a character like Jingliu that her character is still in development. And so we won't know with 100% certainty how good she will actually be until she actually arrives in the game. Even after the special programming, when her kit is basically finalized, we still won't know for sure until she arrives in the game. Now, we can look at certain information to get a general idea or gauge of how good she will be, and I think you know what I'm talking about when I say that, wink wink, nudge nudge, but we still won't know 100% until she actually arrives. So I just wanted everyone to understand that. So let's go ahead and talk about what Jingliu will be bringing to the table and compare her with another character so that we can get a general idea of how she's going to be operating in the game, because the developers decided to take these choices because of the lore they have been developing over the last few months. Blade is a character that will play a lot like Jingliu and vice versa, Jingliu to Blade. There's a reason for that though. Blade, first of all, let's just talk about this, will drain his own HP in order to deal increased damage. Jingliu will drain the team's HP in order to deal increased damage. Because of this, we expect her multiplier to be higher than Blade's, and in lore, we also expect it to be higher than Blade's as well, and on paper, so far, what we're seeing is that this is the case so far. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And there's a reason for this, of course, because in the lore, we found out that Jingliu actually taught Blade a thing or two about the way of the sword. She's also shown Yang Qing a thing or two about the way of the sword, and Jing Yuan a little bit of combat as well. We find out a little bit about this from her drip marketing, where it is expressed that she is willing to teach anyone the way of the sword in her own way. And we also found out from the storyteller on the Xian Zhou Le Fu a little bit about Jingliu as well. If you read enough of his stories or listen to enough of his stories, you'll find out that one of them is about Jingliu. And so it is lore-based that she's actually supposed to be one of the strongest characters in the game. In fact, technically, we haven't heard of a single character that's actually stronger than her, except for maybe Dan Heng and Bibitur Lune, but the story hasn't developed enough for us to know for sure what that means. So let's go ahead and dive into a little bit more about what she's going to be bringing to the table. So based on the damage multipliers we've seen so far, nudge nudge, wink wink, Jingliu is expected to be one of the best characters in the game. And we expected this from Dan Heng and Bibitur Lune as well. In fact, our predictions before his arrival ended up coming true, and he's performed just as good as we all expected him to do. So Jingliu will probably end up doing the same thing. Now be aware, she hasn't come out yet, she's still in development, but it's looking very similar to what we saw with Dan Heng and Bibitur Lune. And if we can compare them a little bit further, they both deal blast damage, just like Blade deals blast damage. What that means is they hit 3 enemies at the same time. So it will be a lot easier to compare their damage to each other versus a character like Sela, who does single target damage. So that's one of the similarities between them. They're also destruction path characters, and they also both have something that mildly holds them back. It's like the trade-off of having so much damage. They have a little bit of something that holds them back just a little bit. And we can build around that with our builds, right? Dan Heng wants to be skill point efficient and he needs a lot of energy, but we can build around that. Jingliu, she's going to be damaging the whole team, and so you're not quite as safe, but we can also build around that, and we get rewarded from that with high damage output. It's known as a risk-reward type of gameplay, and you take that risk with having to build the character correctly and taking a little bit of extra damage, but you end up getting rewarded with a high amount of damage output. So it is expected that Jingliu will be one of the best characters in the game, but you already know this, you don't need me to tell you this. Whether one will be better than the other based on certain content just depends on the content itself. If you walk into Memory of Chaos and they're weak to ice, Jingliu is going to be better. If you walk into Memory of Chaos and the enemy is weak to Imaginary, Dan Heng's going to be better. So they're going to end up, from what we see so far, they're going to end up performing so similarly to each other in terms of overall damage output that it's really going to be content-based whether one outperforms the other. So I really, really like this because the lore seems very similar to that right now as well. The lore doesn't give us anything definitive on which of those two is stronger than the other, but they're both very strong. And it looks like the damage output will show the same thing relatively as well. So to be honest, if you already have a Dan Heng and Bibitre Lune, you're probably not going to need a Jingliu, because Jingliu will probably perform in a very similar fashion to Dan Heng and Bibitre Lune's damage output. So just something to keep in mind. And honestly, if you have a Blade already, you might not need a Jingliu either, because Blade will probably be close but not quite as powerful as Jingliu. Of course, this is only based on what we've seen so far. I did want to point out a really good synergy though between Blade and Jingliu. If you have Blade and Jingliu on the same team, and Blade is wearing the Longevous Disciple set, he will actually have combo with Jingliu, because when Jingliu drains the team's health, that set will activate, and Blade will probably activate as well. So you're going to get like a double damage multiplier off of just Jingliu attacking. And so when Blade's next attack goes off, he's going to have increased damage. This is very, very powerful, and I can't stress enough how strong a Blade and Jingliu team probably will end up being. And there might be lore behind that as well. And with the main story quest that we saw recently, where Locha is hanging out next to Jingliu, there might be yet even more lore to that. Because if you have Locha on the same team as Blade and Jingliu, you're not going to be worried about all that health loss you're taking, because Locha can just take care of that problem for you. I believe that when Jingliu comes out, they're probably going to end up being the strongest team. Locha, Blade, Jingliu, and some type of support character, whether that's somebody that, helps the survivability of the team, or more than likely a support character that buffs Jingliu and Blade at the same time, potentially. So I really, really like the interesting idea that we can see behind that and the synergies we can see behind that particular team. It's definitely expected to be one of the strongest teams out there. It might require a Locha in order to get it done, but for everyone that has Locha, Blade, and potentially Jingliu when she comes out, you're going to have a pretty solid team on your hands. So, should you pull for Jingliu or not? Well, if you need a DPS character in this game, Jingliu and Dan Heng and Bibitre Lune are probably going to be the best characters for DPS in this game for a little while, like probably at least a couple of patches. So if you need a DPS, go ahead and grab one of them. But just be aware, Jingliu will be doing team drain of the HP, so you might not necessarily want her if you don't feel as safe. If you don't like that little bit of anxiety that she will be providing, then you might not want to pull for Jingliu. She's hot. She's fucking hot, and you best believe I'm going to be pulling for her, god dang it. But that doesn't necessarily mean everybody should, just because she's a good-looking character. If you care about gameplay and she gives you anxiety by draining the team's health, then she's not the character for you, and you might want to pull Dan Heng instead. If you need survivability in this game, Lynx and Fu Xuan are going to be on the same banner on the same patch. Part 2 of 1.3 is right around the corner, and this is an amazing time to get some sustainability on your team for, being able to survive through certain content. And it's probably going to be the best opportunities you have for at least a patch and a half. So definitely keep that in mind. For a good little while, you're not going to probably see a little bit of sustainability, because patch 1.4 has no sustainability characters coming whatsoever. So just keep that in mind. And just because these characters are coming out and they all look so good doesn't mean you have to pull. If a sub DPS character like Topaz is up your alley, maybe pull for her because she looks like she's going to be providing some decent damage while also providing a little bit of utility to your team as well, like a sub DPS would. But if none of these characters interest you, just save your Jade, bro. There's a lot of amazing characters coming to this game, and if you think that Hoyoverse isn't going to somehow sneak in more characters from Honkai Impact 3rd, you're crazy, okay? They've already basically done it with Locha by putting in the doppelganger of all doppelgangers with him. And, you know, Sela, Bronya, frickin' Su Shang. There's so many characters from Honkai Impact 3rd in this game. You best bet they're going to be bringing somebody like Raiden Mei and Yai Sakura into the game. It's probably... look, I'm just going to go ahead and say it now. It's probably going to happen. I don't know for sure, but come on, man. You already know it's going to happen. So, if this content was interesting to you in any way, shape, or form, maybe leave a like and subscribe. And if it wasn't, go ahead and leave a hate thread in the comments so I can tell you how much more Jingliu likes me than she likes you. Anyways, I'll catch you next time. Peace.